Hi, it's Marc, Szakonyi, Executive Editor of the Journal of Commerce and JOC.com. And I'm really getting excited about the upcoming Canada Trade Conference again in June in Toronto. We had a great event last year, more than 300 people from all sectors, from the container side, marine terminal, and plenty of shippers to talk about some of the challenges, not only in terms of routing goods in and out of Canada, but also how to secure capacity. And of course, with the new electronic logging device rule taking effect in late 2019 in Canada, and the impact that we saw similar legislation have in the United States, I think much of the program in the Canada Trade Conference in Toronto will be focused on working to find truck capacity and the best ways to secure it. And it's a pleasure to have both of you gentlemen join me, because I know this is part of your daily lives in terms of managing truck capacity, but also you're already in the early days of strategizing in terms of how you're going to work on that potential crunch to make sure shippers get those goods in time and hopefully not for too dear of a price. So Marc, Martin, what are you seeing so far in the Canadian truck market right now?
Well, it's already at capacity, I would say. It's already tough because of the lack of manpower, basically. So just to give you a perspective, roughly 20% of our manpower as drivers are already 60 years old and older. Mm-hmm. So definitely it's a challenge to attract new talent in the trade. So the crunch of the capacity is already there on the manpower side. So definitely if you're talking in the future for the impact of ELD, some big suppliers that have already been impacted in the past with the ELD in the US side, on the cross-border side, will be better prepared, I believe, by securing capacity in the next months to come. So they will not be impacted that much as it was before, because the ELD in the US side on the cross-border was roughly a 30% crunch. Right. So pretty impressive in terms of impact. So I believe there will be an impact still for the smaller customers, but it will be a lot of impact also in the way they behave with the shipping.
Right, and we've definitely seen with the US ELD rule taking effect, as you mentioned, cross-border rates, and a lot of Canadian trucking companies are not only delivering domestically but also have cross-border operations. So we've kind of been through a little bit of that pain already, but I would imagine a lot of the crunch is going to come on the drayage side. Marc, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, to Martin's point, I think not only do we have constraints on drivers in the context, the complexity of the electronic log is going to, specifically on the longer hauls, like from the East Coast and even up into Manitoba, is going to take either team drivers or a gateway or a hub and spoke situation where you're going to need two assets to do the job that you need one. So cost escalation is definitely going to be part of that equation. You're going to need more drivers to actually be efficient to get consistent flow of cargo. But when it comes to how it's going to change the industry as a whole, I mean, the industry has to adapt a collaborative approach to drivers and to the trucking industry as a whole. There's got to be a work-life balance to get more of these individuals, ladies and men, to the marketplace to actually have a good career, have a reasonable pay, and actually want to come into the industry to be drivers, because it's a necessity of the supply chain that's detrimental if we get into that crunch. So I really think that the partnership and that collaborative approach is really going to be important moving forward. And from Martin's point of view, also, I won't speak on his behalf, but the trucking companies now have a choice on who they want to work with.
Right.
So, and it's becoming a lot more selective. Like 5 years ago, if you didn't like Peter, you can go to Jane. And if you didn't like Jane, you went to Marc. But today, I mean, the truckers are looking for, one, people who can forecast properly. Two, can transfer information. Three, they're not going to be waiting in their yard for 6 hours to get offloaded. Four, treating their drivers with respect. So there's really a collaborative approach, or what we call, the shipper's choice initiative that's going on in the States. It's really coming to Canada faster than we think.
No, and one of the legs that we're really watching on, of course, is delivery from Montreal to the Greater Toronto area. that's a trip that usually takes about, what, one a day, possibly? You can get one a day?
Usually a typical driver will do 3 turns in a week and 2 turns in the following week.
Right.
So because we're ELD for a long time, even on the Canadian side, so we can translate that to you. But definitely, if you speak with the other carriers that are not ELD, well, most probably they are more between 3 and 4 turns per week, roughly. So they'll be a crunch.
And I think that obviously just puts even more pressure on the marine terminals for that consistent fluidity, but also faster turn times. And Marc, I know you've been watching this and being part of it closely, but it seems like in the last, at least in 2018, the marine terminals on the Montreal side really kind of came together, saw the growth that was coming through the gateway, and reacted.
Yeah, the growth that we had this year in the Montreal terminal was 3 times its normal growth. I mean, they haven't seen that kind of growth or demand in many years, right, as a whole. So that had a domino effect because no one really forecasted that growth so quickly in such a short period of time. So the port had multiple challenges. It had a manpower and workforce that wasn't there, wasn't trained, wasn't put in place in time to meet that demand. But they've come a long way in the last 6 months, and I think they've got about 120 out of the 140 that they need to actually meet today's demand. The other thing that they've done just recently, because the beginning of the year was, as we all know, was very challenging, but I do applaud them for what the efforts that they've made and the management and the senior management made to actually put in the extended gates, which has helped. But there's an adoption that has to come forward from importers and exporters, because if we don't change behavior between 8 and 5 p.m. or 7 and 5 p.m., it's only 10 to 15% on a good day that's going to come at night to go forward. So if behavior doesn't change, it's not necessarily going to relieve the challenges that we have or that congestion peak period. But importers and exporters have to adopt to a 7-day week like we and Robert Transport was doing, and that's what gets the fluidity going, but that's also what makes a difference between the winners and some of the guys that are going to face bigger challenges moving forward.
Well put. So, as we close out the end of this year, besides the trucking issues, what are the big challenges you see in terms of the Canadian container shipping market for next year?
And particularly with specifically the market of Montreal, I would say congestion is the main struggle that we have for another close to 2 years. So even if the port is doing its best in terms of flexing the hours, even if we add extra capacity, the congestion is still there. So the location is specific for that, and there's no way around this. There's bridges to cross, so fun times ahead the next 2 years.
And to be fair, though, this is a problem that's coming out of a good thing, strong container growth. So I mean, it's not that. They're dealing with the situation.
You could see it that way. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. What about you, Marc?
If I'm looking at it on the ground, I agree with what Martin has said in the context. If I'm looking at it from an industry as a whole, the stakeholders have to really come to the table and start being accountable for what they control. I mean, the schedule integrity this year is at an all-time record low. That creates a lot of pressure on the ports with bunching and delays. There's a domino effect on the congestion. They don't necessarily have the manpower to meet that demand when the schedule integrity is so off track. And then the rail cars cannot meet the demand of having all that cargo in the port, or the truck demand that comes in because of the velocity going through. So I think if we can really work together collaboratively on all stakeholders, including government, I think we can start making a dent in some of these challenges that we have and some of the cost escalations that we're facing. But what's most important is to have fluidity, consistent flow of your goods, and getting your assets to store or to the manufacturer or to the production line.
Yeah, I take your point. I mean, ocean reliability globally has fallen, but it seems like, at least in the western gateways, we haven't seen the meltdowns that we did last year. Although there were still plenty of rail delays in Vancouver earlier this year, but things have seemed to be a little bit more fluid. Does that kind of match up with what you've been seeing?
Yeah, I think Q1 is going to really be something that we're going to start to see some noticeable improvements. Prince Rupert is working well. They had their challenges at the beginning of the year, but they've ironed them out, and CN has been able to provide them with the rail car capacity that we need. GCT has had their challenges, and DP have had their challenges based on, the increase of volumes, although it was single digit, but it still has an impact because the infrastructure, the construction, and the new gantry system that they have takes time to adopt, right? There were some challenges on getting the productivity up to speed. There was a compounding effect because of the volumes coming in and the schedule bunching. And then there was a rail car situation that could not meet the demand because of the volumes on the port. So our estimates is Q1. I think we should start seeing some light from the fruit of the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that are being invested in infrastructure, both on rails, ports, and service. And we hope that we'll be able to turn that page.
Good. Well, we'll definitely be discussing it in June in Canada for the Canada Trade Conference, and of course, tracking very closely what some of the new legislation and just kind of a graying workforce mean for securing truck capacity, both in terms of delivery but also pricing. So, gentlemen, thank you again for taking the time, and it was a good chat.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Very
Have a
good.
day.